honor to hear a lecture by our dear friend Ken Abramowitz, שבא פה עם אשתו היקרה, חברתנו נירה, who came here with his wife נירה ושני חברים and two friends. If you did Google on Ken Abramowitz, he did a lot of things, Ken. New businesses and helping hospitals. The main thing that we know of Ken, אוהב ארץ ישראל בכל רמ"ח איבריו, בכל גופו ובכל נשמתו ובכל ליבו. A lover of the land of Israel with all his neshama, with all his heart, with all his body, everything. ממש מחיאות כפיים מפר. ומה הכי מרשים, and what is the most impressive? בשקט שלו, in his quiet ways. הכל תמיד בשקט, in his calm, ממש מדהים. What we learned from Ken Abramowitz is איך שהוא מעביר הרצאות. How he passes on lectures. Very often when we invite a speaker, we tell the speaker how long he should speak, and very often it doesn't stay. Ken Abramowitz אומר לנו תמיד ככה, you always tell us, do you want a lecture of 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 20 minutes? What do you want? And Ken has the incredible כישרון, talent, of saying everything that needs to be said within the framework of what the people ask. It is a big honor to have Ken Abramowitz speak. He will tell you himself what and how long it's going to take. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? מי הטובים? מי הרעים? ומה צריך לעשות כדי לנצח? And what do we need to do in order to win? בבקשה, Ken Abramowitz.
Thank you very much, Nadia and Yehudit, for hosting me, and everyone at Oz V'Gayon who does their great work here in honor of our three of our favorite people who passed away due to terrorism, and it's great to remember them and all that Oz V'Gayon does for the memory of the three soldiers and for Judea and Samaria. So today I'm going to give two talks, 10 minutes apiece, one on good and one on evil. Good and evil. And then I will answer questions for 20 minutes, and that will use up our 45 minutes. So first we're going to discuss good. So I have a simple question for all of you. Raise your hand if you think that you're good. If you're good, raise your hand. I want to make sure everyone is good. Are we missing some people? Okay, now raise your hand if you're evil. Anyone here that's evil? Evil? You're evil? We have two people. Sometimes. Okay, so the question we're going to examine are, why are you good? What is the definition of good? I mean, you think you're good, so I'm going to help you define good. So here we have a sunshine, shemesh. Pretend that it's yellow, just like the sun in the sky. This is who you are, you're good. And now I'm going to give you three definitions of good. One is you believe in Torah. Do you believe in Torah? Do you like to read Torah? You believe in the values of the Torah? Yes. Number two, you believe in the basic laws of Israel. That's the secular law. In America, we call it the Constitution and Bill of Rights. In Israel, you call it basic law. So you believe in that also. Now, there's a third reason why you're good, is I'm going to give you a sentence from America. It's not used so often in Israel, but in 1776, in the year 1776, in our Declaration of Independence from England, there was a famous line written by the founders of America who also read Torah. They were Christians, but they understood Torah. And they summarized the Torah in one sentence. And they said that the function of the government is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, obviously, liberty, freedom, in the pursuit of happiness. In other words, your ability to become happy. The government cannot make you happy. You have to make yourselves happy. But the government has to give you a society in which you can study, you can grow, you can have families, you can have children, grandchildren. That's the pursuit of happiness. And it's also the pursuit of property. Originally, it was the pursuit of property, and they changed it to the pursuit of happiness. So all of you who are good, everyone here, you're good for 3 reasons, as we just discussed. Torah, basic laws, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So does everybody here still think that they're good? Okay? So the answer is yes, you're all good. Now, you could say, so what is the problem? You're good, and your friends are good, your parents are good, everyone's good, but the world's not full of people who are good. It's also full of people who are evil. So before we go to evil, I want to add one more element of the people who are good, but not quite as good as they should be. And so, my wife is going to add a section. We do not have the color white, but the paper is white. So we're going to have a little section. So pretend that this is yellow and this is white as you see it. I color-coded white for another group of people who are still good, but I call them isolationists. Isolationists. They do not want to fight the enemies. They just worry about themselves. So going back to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the people in the circle, the sunshine, the Shemesh, believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people in Israel. The whites believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people who live within the Green Line. In 1967 armistice lines of Israel, but they do not believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody in Judea and Samaria. And previously, they did not believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody in Gush Katif. And they did not believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everyone in Yamit, in Sinai. So the whites are not evil people. It's they're uneducated or miseducated. And we, over time, have to convince the whites to become yellow and care about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people of Israel, wherever they live. Does not matter where they live. So you can, another way of saying that is sovereignty in Judea and Samaria is the equivalent of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody in Israel. In contrast to the whites, who would just say, why do I care about Judea and Samaria? I live in Tel Aviv or Herzliya. Why do I care about Gaza? Gush Katif, it's not my problem. Well, it is your problem, because in the Middle East, there's only 2 countries that control the Middle East. It's either Israel or Iran. Israel or Iran. So if Israel, you, are not on this hill, Iran is on its hill. Now, they have many different names. We call them proxies in English. They could be called Hamas. They could be called Hezbollah. It does not matter what they're called. They're Iran. So in the Middle East now, it's a battle between Iran and Israel. And the Middle East is not big enough for Iran and Israel. So either Israel succeeds or Iran succeeds. And this is known as a state of war. And the question, I have one more question before we go to evil. If Israel's in a state of war, when did the war begin? So here I'm going to ask you, now you have a chance to answer. When did the war begin? By the way, there's many answers. There's not one answer for this. Nation.
As nation, we are always ready to fight. Like, we are never have a peace and quiet. So that war never stops.
That's
So
right.
it's always there.
Right. The war never stops. It's always there. When did the war begin? Now, this boy said,
When Israel was born,
when,
always attack us
when was Israel born?
in the 1948.
Okay. So, as I said, there's many answers. So you gave one of the correct answers. The war began in 1948 when Israel was established and the neighboring Arab armies invaded. But it began before that. So now let's go back earlier into time. When did the war begin?
86, 61, when the Muslim conflict began. Then they started to believe that Israel is the holy land of them. We believe Israel is the holy land of us. So that's when the conflict began.
Right. So you could argue the conflict began in approximately the year 650. Muhammad lived until about 630, and then his successors took the ideas of Muhammad and decided to take over the world. Most of the world at that time was Christian, so they invaded Christian Egypt, Christian Turkey, Christian Iraq, Syria. So you could also argue the war began in approximately the year 650. That's also a correct answer. So now let's go further back into history. When did the war begin?
It seemed that the war began, like, it didn't begin, it always was.
That's right. It always was, but it did begin. There's two dates that I'm looking for. Further.
I don't have a literally. Maybe when we get the Quran outside, like, we have
The Torah? Yeah. Yes. So you could say that the war began 3,300 years ago, approximately, when the Jewish people received the Torah.
Like, it always was, and it began.
Okay. So another correct answer is 3,300 years ago. Let's go further back. I'm looking for one more date further back into history.
When Yaakov down to Egypt, and the Shabud, started in the...
Yes, that would be approximately 3,500 years ago when the Jews were slaves in Egypt. That's the correct answer. Let's go further back. Okay, so now you got to the final answer, 3,800 years ago, when Abraham existed, came onto the scene, that's when the war began. The war against the Jews began with the first Jew. So the war's been going on continuously for 3,800 years. So now the question is, why do the forces of evil want to destroy the forces of good? If we're so good, should not everybody be good? Why do people want to be evil? So when Abraham came in the Torah, he represented the rule of law. It actually took 500 years from Abraham to Moshe to create the rule of law, which we call Torah. 613 commandments. Took 500 years. But Abraham was the beginning of the rule of law. So you should say everybody should have been happy. Jews, not Jews, everyone should have said, oh, this is so exciting, we have a rule of law from Hashem. So why was everyone unhappy? Because if you're a professional criminal If you're a king, for example, and you write your own laws, do you really want Abraham and Moshe and the Torah and Hashem to create 613 commandments that you have to obey? So that began the war. Basically, the criminals declared war on the people who believed in the rule of law. So now let's go to evil. We're going to spend another 10 minutes looking at evil. In the Torah days, evil could be summarized as the golden calf. The people who believed in the golden calf did not believe in Hashem and did not believe in the 613 commandments, did not believe in Torah. And Moshe ordered the Levites to kill 3,000 people. And that was the end of the golden calf. Now, the golden calf was 3,300 years ago. As we say, it's ancient history, right? Golden calf, ancient history. So I'm going to show you that the golden calf still lives with us today. It's not an old story. I mean, it's an old story, but it's a new story. And I'm going to explain to you who the golden calf is now. Because as you get older and you go to the army, or you go to university, or you create families, you're going to face the golden calf. The golden calf is always here. But it changes its name, it can change its color, but it's the golden calf. It's the rejection of the rule of law, rejection of Torah, rejection of the basic law, rejection of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. So the question is, who is the golden calf today? So, my wife is going to help you see the golden calf. Yes, and now the big circle, and then the colors. Now, the golden calf has changed its color. 3,300 years ago, obviously, it was gold, yellow. Today, there's 3 golden calves that we're fighting, or you could say it's the same golden calf, but it has 3 different colors. The reds, the greens, and the blues. So now we're going to discuss the reds, the greens, and the blues. My wife's going to make a nice little picture for you of the reds, the greens, and the blues, and then I'm going to explain to you who are the reds, the greens, and the blues. Now, as a summary, remember I said the sunshine people, the golden people, the Shemesh. We, the good people, remember I said, believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. The reds, the greens, and the blues, which I will define for you, believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 10% of the people. Themselves, their family, their friends, but not for the other 90. If you go back into history with the kings of throughout history, the kings always believed in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 10% of the population. But then the Americans came along, aided by Torah. The Americans came along and said, no, it's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. This battle between the king and the people has been going on even before Abraham. It's been going on forever and ever and ever. The question is, do the people work for the king, or does the king work for the people? This tension, I call it World War III. It's actually World War I. It's been going on since before Abraham. It's since the beginning of humans. There's always been tension between who runs a society, the king or the people. We believe the people. We, the democracies, believe the people run the government, the bad guys believe the kings run the government. So here we have now our reds, greens, and blues. So the reds, if you can see it, it's in English, it's a big government. How do you say big government in Hebrew? Memshala Gadola? Oh. Okay, very good. So big government. Another way of saying big government is socialism, communism. And if you look at it in terms of countries, it's China and Russia. China, Russia. Now, China and Russia, if you look at a map, China's over there and Russia's over there. But today, in World War III, which is actually World War I, China and Russia are over there, but they're here too. So as you get older, you will see fingerprints, intellectual fingerprints, from China and Russia. They're false narratives based on a strong government where you're the slaves and they run the government and steal all the money. It's an old, old story. But today, we have China and Russia. By the way, the difference between World War I and World War II and what I call World War III is World War I and World War II, the war was over there. In World War III, the war is here. Inside your heads, your school, future universities, newspaper, internet, you will every single day for the rest of your life be fighting, intellectually fighting, the false narratives of the Reds. Let's go to the Greens. The Greens are the Islamists. It's color-coded for the color of Islam. If you go past a mosque, it's green. So using the green, that's the Islamists. Now there's a difference between Islam and Islamism. Islam is a religion that individual people can believe in. Islamism, also known as political Islam, is a political movement. And they're trying to take over the world and convert everybody to Islam. So that's a political movement, not a religion. So when I say the Greens, I'm talking about Islamism. In other words, the political movement of Islam. I'm not talking about Islam. All the Muslims are not enemies. It's the 10 or 20% who believe in Islamism who are the enemies. And in terms of countries, it's Iran, Turkey, Qatar, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. They have many different names. But they all want to take over the world and force everybody to become Muslim. That's Islamism. Let's go to the blues. Who are the blues? The blues are the globalists. Color-coded blue for the United Nations color. It's in a world government. So Israel does not need its own government. America does not need its own government because the world government will take care of everybody. This is what I call a false narrative, and it's part of the three major false narratives that we're discussing today. Also part of the blue is the social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, Google, who have decided to impose, who's decided to take freedoms away from everybody by restricting freedom of speech, breaking American law, but making their Chinese friends happy. But I do not care about their Chinese friends. I care about Americans and Israelis being happy. If you've ever heard of Davos, the World Economic Forum, that's also part of the blues. So I'm going to conclude in about 1 minute and then answer some of your questions. And just as a piece of advice to you, maintain, as you get older, you'll be fighting individual wars, not with bullets and guns, but with ideas. And as you get older, be sure to stay loyal to what makes you good. Torah, basic laws, and using an American sentence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have to stay strong. Those are all good things to believe in. And you are going to be attacked, not with guns, but with books, newspapers, internet, television, however they want to attack you. You will be attacked every day by the reds, the greens, and the blues. And when someone presents to you an idea that makes no sense, ask yourself, is this a red idea, a green idea, or a blue idea? And then say to yourself, it makes no sense, and make sure that that bad idea does not enter your good brain. This is the personal war that we actually all fight. And we have to win this war. It's a war of ideas rather than a war of bullets. And it's a war of consciousness. And I just want you to make sure that if you're good today, you stay good. And do not resist the reds, the greens, and the blues. I will leave you with a final thought. Why do so many people join the reds, the greens, and the blues? Because they all offer false narratives that sound good. So, for example, the reds would say, if you give me your freedom, I will give you a subsidy for your house, your food, health insurance, education. Just give me your freedom. And it's very tempting for someone to say, okay, I would like a subsidy for my house, for my health insurance, for my education, and I will give up some freedom, but you're going to become a slave of the reds. But that's how they get people to like them, because they give away things for free. Why do people join the Greens? The Greens would say, become Muslim or I'm going to kill you. So I'm not giving you a subsidy for your house or children or whatever subsidy you might want. I'm giving you 30 seconds to decide. And if you don't become Muslim, I'm going to take your head off. That's how the Muslims grew. That's why there's 1.5 billion Muslims. And it was all done through fear, through the sword, as they say. And then we have the the blues. Why do people listen to the blues? Because their ideas sound good, that we have a world community, and the world works together, and we do not have to fight each other, we just work together. Of course, they did not finish the sentence, we work together as slaves. And then the blues make all the decisions for every single country, and every single country becomes a slave to the blue world order, to the United Nations, to Davos, to the World Economic Forum. So we cannot listen to this false narrative either. So I just I'm here to warn you that you're going to be fighting false narratives for the rest of your life, and you have to stay true to Torah, basic laws, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. So it was great to be able to be with you today. I hope I help you a little bit understand the challenges you face as you get older and make you stronger to resist all the temptations of the reds, the greens, and the blues, which I call the golden calf, just with different colors.
We want to say thank you. Amazing. What is amazing, it's so simple and so clear. Ken, you're unbelievable, אתה מדהים. I forgot to mention, שכחתי להגיד, that Ken, in addition to everything he is, he decided to do something. That is one of the things that we're learning in this seminar. אנחנו לומדים בסמינריון הזה על כל מיני אנשים שהיה להם חיים פרטיים, כמו, אתם זוכרים אתמול בעטרות, בני שפרן, פתאום הוא שמע משהו והתחיל. כן, כן גם, also כן. He was busy with many different very important projects, but then decided to save the West. וזה שכחתי להגיד בהתחלה, I forgot to mention at the beginning, created this incredible website, הקים את האתר הזה שנקרא Save the West, הצילו את המערב, ושם נאבק, נלחם בנרטיבים, fights those narratives that you're talking about, עם המילה, with a word, lectures, articles, מאמרים, כתבים. So we're not going to let you off the hook so quickly, אנחנו לא ניתן לך ללכת ככה. יהיה פה שאלות, ואני לוקחת את הזכות לשאול את השאלה הראשונה. I take the privilege to ask the first question. You tell them, אתה אומר להם, fight, don't let them, how? You say, how do we win? You told them, you said to them, אמרת לנוער, אתם חייבים לנצח. תן כמה טיפים, give a few tips. How to win.
Okay. Okay, so there's two separate questions there. How do we win? The two separate questions is how do we win as individuals? How do we win as countries? As individuals, we have to maintain our own internal self-confidence. We all believe in Torah, 613 commandments, Hashem. We all believe in the basic laws of Israel, which are the secular laws. And then we believe in, from America, but you also believe it, even though you do not use this sentence, we believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. So as individuals, we have to stay strong in our confidence that we're right, we have good values, and we have to stay strong as we're attacked culturally, with words, not with knives. We're attacked with words that destroy our confidence in our values. So as I said, when you hear something that makes no sense, you should say to yourself, wait a minute, where did this idea that made no sense come from?
Like a two-state solution, for instance.
Okay, two-state solution. Okay, so that's an good example. So you say to yourself, in whose interest is a two-state solution? Who invented this concept? Is it in the interest of Israel or the Jews? No. Is it in the interest of the Arabs? No. Well, Jews and Arabs live. Is it the interest of Christians? Christians also live in Israel? No. So in whose interest is a two-state solution? It's in the interest of the Greens. Well, who are the Greens? Iran, Hamas, Turkey, Qatar. Well, who cares about the interests of those evil countries or evil organizations? So these evil organizations came up with a purposely dumb idea to have a Jewish state and an Arab state because they want to take over the Arab state and then attack the Jewish state. So that's a good example of a false narrative, which is not in the interest, as I said, of the Jews or the Arabs or the Christians or the Muslims. It's not in anyone's interest except your outside enemies. Here's a good example of outside enemies creating false narratives, putting them into your school books, into your university books, into the newspapers, and then you read it and say, well, I guess it sounds logical, but remember, in the world there's no logic. There's good and evil, and you have to stand for the forces of good and resist the forces of evil. So that's a good example of false narratives that you will confront as you get older. Now and as you get older. Now then the question is, as a country, whether it's Israel or America, how do we defeat the forces of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues? That's a complicated question, but I'll try to answer it in a simple way. So I'll try to answer this complicated question in one sentence. We as a country, whether it's Israel or America, we have to destroy the reds, the greens, and the blues. Is that simple enough for you? Before they destroy us. It's the same question Moshe Rabbeinu was asking himself. The reds, the greens, and the blues at that time were connected, but they were yellow, golden calf. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, putting words in his mouth, we have to destroy the golden calf and the people behind the golden calf. And he did it. Unfortunately, we did not have Moshe Rabbeinu with us anymore. Moshe Rabbeinu is the best leader in the history of the world. So every leader that we have now, I have an expression, they're 65% Moshe Rabbeinu, or they're 32% Moshe Rabbeinu. But no one's Moshe Rabbeinu. So we have to do the best we can with the governments that we have. And we have to, as governments, as countries, we have to destroy the reds and the greens and the blues. So anything, if you look at it in terms of countries, anything that hurts China and Russia is good. Anything that hurts Iran, Turkey, Qatar, Hamas is good. Anything that hurts the United Nations, World Economic Forum, the social media companies is good. So that'll give you a quick summary of how to defeat the forces of evil without Moshe Rabbeinu helping us. Okay, who else has some questions? Yes. Okay.
From where did you ממה שאמרת נשמע שהפתרון לכחולים זה לפרק את האו"ם, to dissolve the United Nations. That's the solution.
Okay, so the question is, remember I said in one sentence, we have to destroy the reds, the greens, and the blues. Well, the United Nations is part of the blues. Yes, we have to destroy the United Nations. We never should have set up the United Nations. It was a dumb idea to begin with. By the way, where did the dumb idea of having a United Nations making decisions for all the countries in the world, which is actually illegal, by the way, the Prime Minister of Israel, or the President of America, is responsible for the interests of Israel, not the interests of the world. Why would he take any advice from a global organization? Well, the idea of came from the Russians. After World War II, the Russians saw that America was so strong, and they wanted to reduce the power of America. So this was a Russian idea, which makes sense, because all the bad ideas in the world come from the reds, the greens, and the blues. So whenever you see something that you cannot understand or cannot believe, ask yourself, in whose interest was this dumb idea? Because the reds, the greens, and the blues, are, even though they're evil, they're managed by very smart people. And in the Kremlin, or the equivalent, the Emperor's Palace in China, these evil people sit around and say, how do I destroy the yellows and the whites? How do I destroy people who are normal? You should bear in mind that the reds and the greens and the blues play offense 100% of the time. We, normal people, we play defense 100% of the time. The reason the IDF is called Israel Defense Forces, it should be called Israel Offense Forces. But in democracies, we always think about defense. The reds and the greens and the blues always think about offense. So what else do we have for a question? Yes.
הצהובים הכי טובים, אבל אז אתה אמרת שגם הלבנים טובים, אבל הם גם לא כל כך טובים. מה זאת אומרת? כאילו, איפה הלבנים עומדים? מה המצב שלהם?
No.
You said both the yellows and the whites are good. But what is the difference?
Okay, so the question is, going back to the yellows and the whites. My color code. The yellows are sunlight. There's the sun in the sky. And Judaism, by the way, is a religion of life, of light, life and light. We provide light unto other nations. So using now an American term, for yellows, we believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people in Israel, wherever they live and whoever they are. In other words, they can live in Efrat or Gush, or it does not matter where they live, and it does not matter who they are. In other words, I think Muslims and Christians and Jews, all human beings, have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's not just a Jewish issue or an Israel issue or an American issue. It's a human rights issue. So the yellows would say life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all citizens, residents, Israelis, Jews, Christians, Muslims, wherever they live in Israel. Under Israel sovereignty, because it's either Israel sovereignty or Iranian sovereignty. You only have two choices, Israel or Iran. It's not complicated. You want Israel to control the hill or Iran to control the hill or the village or the city. Now, the whites would say that I believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody who lives within the green line, not over the green line. In other words, the 1967 borders or the 1948 borders, and they would say, I do not care about people outside of the borders of 48 or 67, and so take Gush Katif. Most people in Israel said we do not have to be in Gush Katif. They did not use these words, but they would have said, Gush Katif, 10,000 people, they do not deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Isn't that in fact playing along with the red, blues, and the green?
Yes, so that was another example of a false narrative to say we should remove, or ethnically cleanse, actually is the better word, we should ethnically cleanse Gaza of Jews. Well, who came up with that stupid idea? That was from the Greens.
But if it's like this, why they're not red, blue, and green? How is not part of it when they don't think everybody deserves it?
Why, even like that, why is the whites are not part of the evil? If they gather
The whites are not evil, they're just misinformed. They're miseducated, or they're poorly educated. They do not understand that they're not acting in their own self-interest. For example, go back to Gush Katif time, 15 years. If someone says, we have to get out of Gush Katif, Jews should not be in Gaza, remove them. If you then said to them, yes, we can remove them, and then we're going to take missiles from Iran, put them there, and they're going to shoot missiles at your house and kill everyone in your house. Do you still want to remove the Jews from, the Israelis from Gush Katif? They go, oh, I did not know that after the Jews are removed, Iran and its agents will take over, build missiles, and shoot them at me. No one told me that. So this person is not evil. They were naive. They were uninformed, misinformed, and they were listening to the false narrative of the Greens. The Greens wanted the Jews removed from Gush Katif so they could take over Gaza, shoot missiles at Israel, and then destroy Israel. So this is another good example of a silly, false narrative. But at the time, most of the Jews, most of the Israelis believed that it was in Israel's interest to leave Gush Katif. But they were wrong. But they were wrong not because they're evil. They were wrong, they were not educated properly. Yes?
שאלה אחרונה.
So two more questions. You take one and then over to your friend.
איך אפשר לעבור ממצב של מגננה מהאדומים, הירוקים והכחולים למצב של התקפה של להתחיל לפרק אותם ולנצח בעצם?
Okay. No, let me focus on this first. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, can the people who are good move to the offense and better fight the people who are evil? Can we close the gap? Well, that's my number one argument, is that the people who are good cannot play defense 100% of the time. For example, if you go to a football game, your favorite team plays defense approximately 50% of the time and plays offense approximately 50% of the time. So I would argue, as you would, that it's time for the yellows and the whites, the democracies, to play just like a football game, play offense half of the time, play defense half of the time, but do not play defense 100% of the time. Makes no sense. And, but there is a problem. And the problem is, in a democracy, pretend that I want to be the prime minister. And pretend, or the president of America, any country. And I say to you, please support me. Vote for me. I'm good. But I am going to destroy the reds, the greens, and the blues. I'm going to take your money, and I'm going to buy more airplanes, more bombs, more submarines, more soldiers, and we're going to destroy the reds and the greens and the blues. And we're going to fight every single day, offense. Every single day that I'm prime minister or president, we will be fighting a full-scale war, full-scale offense to destroy the reds and the greens and the blues. So here's a test. Who is voting for me? How many people? Okay, but you see what the problem is. If you talk about this with 100% honesty, you cannot get elected in a democracy. So that's one of the big challenges. Do you want to ask the same?
It's kind of the same, but not really. You said earlier that. Yeah, no. You said earlier we need to take down the reds, the greens, the blues before they take us down. Now we know it's not that simple as you presented. Maybe it could be possible in the world, whatever. What can we, as the small people, not the the government, the whatever, can do?
So let's go back to the issue of what can we do as an individual, not as a country, just we as individuals. How do we survive and thrive? I mean, you want to survive and thrive when we're under attack by the reds and the greens and the blues. And the point is, we as individuals, we have to play offense 50% of the time, defense 50%, just like in a football game. And so when you get older and you go to a university and someone says to you, Israel's an illegal occupier of Arab lands, how do you respond to that false narrative? Right, so there's two ways to respond, offense and defense. Defense, I'll give you an example. Defense is, we are not occupiers of Arab lands. You're wrong. We did not do that. That's defense, okay? Offense is, we're not occupiers of Arab lands, but the Arabs are occupiers of Jewish lands. And your forefathers illegally invaded Israel approximately the year 650. You should have stayed in Saudi Arabia because you're Arabs. And you illegally came to Israel and stole Jewish lands. How could you do something like that? Go back to Saudi Arabia. Now that's an example of playing offense and defense. So as you get older and you know more, hopefully you know enough now, but as you know more and more and more, always think in terms of offense and defense, and just like a football, no more complicated than a football game, and always remember to stay on the offense. And when the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues attack you, not with knives, but with words and silly ideas, you stand your ground, and then you punch back, not literally punch back, you intellectually punch back at their false narrative.
Last question.
שאלת על, אני רוצה לדבר על הכחולים, הרבה פעמים, כאילו, כל השנה האחרונה, בתכלס מי שבאמת חי טיפה בתקשורת הישראלית, שמענו מהצד של הטלגרם הרבה מאוד קונספירציות על ממשלה אחת, על מלא דברים שהם בנושא, ועל זה שזה קשור לבית המלוכה הבריטי. האם יש לזה בסיס לטענות האלה מבחינתך, או שיש כמה אנשים שרק מקדמים את הנושא של ממשלה אחת, וכל התיאוריות קונספירציה של גם מה שקרה אפילו בקורונה, יש אנשים שקישרו את זה, מי שטיפה שמע קצת בישראל את הקונספירציה, יש מי שקישרו את הקורונה לכחולים, על פי מה שאתה אומר. האם זה נכון או לא?
Okay, the question is there a world conspiracy against people who are normal, people who are good? First, let me just remind you again, when you get home, be sure to sign up for my website. It's savethewest.com. By the way, when I say saving the West or saving Western civilization, it's the same as saving democracy. It's just Western civilization is just another word for democracy. Half the people in the world live in a democracy, half live in a dictatorship. We have to save the democracies from the dictatorships. So it's savethewest.com. Also, it'll help you with your English. I write an article every 2 weeks, and the article will come right to your email after you sign up. So the question is, who wants to take over the world? Is there a conspiracy of forces? Well, going back to the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues independently came up with the decision to take over the world. Now, a question is, when did they make that decision? The Reds made the decision to take over the world about 100 years ago when Lenin and his communist criminals illegally took over Russia in 1917. 30 or so years later, in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party made the decision to illegally take over China. So we have these two, I would argue, illegal criminal organizations, Russia and China, independently made the decision to take over the world on behalf of the Reds, make everyone communist. Everyone is basically a slave to them. The Blues also declared war on democracy 100 years ago, 1923, with the League of Nations, which then became the United Nations in 1946. So the Blue War has been going on for 100 years, also, by coincidence, 100 years. The Red War has been going on 100 years. And the Green War began with Muhammad. So roughly 1,400 years ago, Muhammad and his successors made the decision to take over the world. And they took over about a third of the world at the time, mostly the Christian world, by killing the Christians. Now, because it was 1,400 years ago, no one remembers. The Christians do not remember how many Christians died from Muhammad and his followers. So that war has been going on 1,400 years. So it's not one conspiracy. It's three separate criminal organizations, which I call Reds, Greens, and Blues, independently made the decision to take over the world and make us all their slaves. We don't want to be their slaves. So that's why we have to stop them.
תודה רבה. Judith has a question, and then I also want to say one thing. Judith asked the very important question, which we discuss very often. Can we, as a democracy, really succeed because of all the faults of democracies? And the one thing that I wanted to say before I knew that you had a question is that to tell each and one of you that the sovereignty movement, fighting for sovereignty, when we explain, Judith and I, to people who are not so religious or not even Jewish, why do we need Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? It's not only, of course, because it's Tanakh and because it's ours, but it's also in order to be part of this movement of saving the West, because only when there's Israeli sovereignty will we be able to fight the red, blue, and white. So Judith's question, isn't there a problem, inborn problem, in the fact that we are a democracy? Can a democracy fight them?
So I spend a lot of time thinking about your question of who is going to win, the forces of good or the forces of evil, or as I have here, the whites, which thanks to what you do, will become yellow, and then we'll be stronger, because now we're divided. People who are good are divided between yellow and white. That's not, I do not like that division. I want the whites to become yellow and believe in sovereignty for Israel throughout 100% of Israel. And, but the answer is democracies have big flaws and dictatorships have big flaws. So I will give you an example. Democracies can make bad decisions. Leaving Gush Katif was a bad decision. Leaving southern Lebanon was a bad decision, but they were politically popular. People said, why should my son or daughter risk their life in Gush Katif for some religious Jews that I do not know and do not like? So the democracy worked, but it made huge mistake. Because people are humans, and humans can make mistakes. Now let's go to dictatorships. President Putin, 5 months ago, he's the dictator. He makes all the decisions. He has no one to stop him. He made the decision to invade Ukraine. Well, invading Ukraine will go down in history as one of the dumbest mistakes ever made by a country in the history of countries. But Putin is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. I never met him, but I meet him on YouTube. So through YouTube, I feel like I've met President Putin, and he's the smartest leader around. But he made the dumbest mistake. So the point I'm getting to is both democracies can make mistakes, and dictatorships can make mistakes, and democracies can make good decisions, and dictatorships can make good decisions. But the big difference, what saves democracies is not their government, it's their businesses. For example, you have a phone. Was the phone developed by the Israeli government or the American government or any government? No. It was some very smart people in California working for Apple who figured out, or Samsung, who figured out how to produce that. So Israel and America, the two most creative countries in the world, are full of corporations, small, medium, big, who create the engine of growth for the country in spite of the government. So the point I'm getting to is if you just look at the government, there's not a great future for democracies. But if you look at the government and the creative talent that lives in a democracy, the brains, the hard work, then you have a society that functions well. Just as a final point, I was reading in the internet that something in the past few years, 2 years, 100,000 people have left Russia from their high technology industries. Massive, massive brain drain. And in another year, there'll be another 100,000, another 100,000, another 100,000. Whereas where in the world are people coming to? They're coming to Israel. They're coming to America. But they're coming to Israel and America because we give people an opportunity to pursue their happiness, to grow, to educate themselves, to work hard, to make money, to join different types of companies. So I will still bet on democracies because we're the engine of brains. And we respect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 100% of the population. And the dictatorships will always make a fatal mistake somewhere along the line. And so there's two ways for democracies to win. One is because we actually win, and the other is because the bad guys lose. So right now, we're winning against Russia, not because we're winning against Russia, because Russia, the bad guys are losing. So I want the good guys to also win, as well as the bad guys to lose.